Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, June 26, 2026. This week's Chairman's Report is guest written by Jade Walle, Vice President of UR Energy Incorporated, a CPA, and a member of the Americans for Fair Taxation Board of Directors. Psychological predisposition, income, and property taxes. In last week's Chairman's Report, we highlighted a famous Adam Smith quote from The Wealth of Nations, which reads, "The property which every man has in his own labor, as it's the original foundation of all other property, so it is the most sacred and inviolable." This quote highlights how our income is sacred to us because it is the primary, if not the only source of all other property we will ever acquire and have the brief privilege and responsibility to care for in our allotted time here on earth. So, what's the psychological predisposition and effect of our nation's income tax as it relates to Mr. Smith's inescapable human truth? Well, we see the answer to that question is painfully obvious. Our nation's illegal evasion tax gap is $1 trillion a year, as pointed out by the IRS Commissioner in 2021 sworn testimony. Now that's bad, but it's only going to get worse. As illegal tax evasion is a severe form of fraud, it's useful to examine the study of how and when fraud usually occurs. Research on the motivation behind fraud began in the 1950s and culminated with what is known as the fraud triangle, which highlights three things which must be present when fraud occurs. One is incentives or pressures, two, rationalization or justification, and three, opportunity. Now, the simple reality that rings true is that if humans are involved, the first two elements of the fraud triangle are always going to be present, meaning we cannot train, teach, or coach people out of having pressure or incentive to steal and enrich themselves. It also means that with humanity, it will always find a way to make our bad choices and thievery justifiable in our own minds. Sadly, this is just our human condition for now. So, how would the fair tax change this rampant and illegal tax evasion? By cutting off the opportunity leg of the fraud stool so that it comes crashing down. Now, the fair tax is a simple national sales tax collected at the point of sale on new retail goods and services. Now, today, over 90% of all retail sales are made by only a few hundred U.S. retailers. Think Walmart, Amazon, Home Depot, etc. Now, can you imagine trying to tell the clerk or the online checkout window chatbot that you're just not going to be paying the sales tax? That would be an exercise in futility. Now, the reality is that with the current income tax, hundreds of millions of U.S. individuals and businesses are essentially on the honor system. They're being asked to honestly report all of their income and claim only those credits and deductions that they're legally entitled to. Now, most do, but many don't. Unfortunately, it's ridiculously easy for even honest taxpayers to make mistakes. There are hundreds of different IRS tax forms. The instructions alone are thousands of pages long. Now add up all the statutes, regulations, instructions, and case law, and you'll find that our current tax code approaches 90,000 pages long. And no one, not even trained tax professionals, can understand it all. Yet, we're all expected to understand our tax situation and comply with the law. The rate of IRS audits continues to decline, and our illegal tax evasion continues to grow at unprecedented rates. Now, the simple fact is that the fair tax takes that hazard out of play. If the vast preponderance of U.S. retail sales has near zero probability of illegal evasion, then why wouldn't we use this much simpler, fairer, more transparent, and more easily administered taxation system? While the depravity of humanity cannot be curtailed by man, the fair tax does remove the psychological predisposition to cheat on our taxes because the source of our property is no longer being confiscated. The fair tax would usher in a voluntary tax system where we choose when and where to pay the fair tax on purchases beyond the necessities of life. The fair tax prebate mechanism reimburses all citizens for the tax paid on life's necessities. We will also be able to choose whether to purchase used items like houses or automobiles, which are not subject to the fair tax, or new items where the fair tax is collected. The inclination for fraud is not only eliminated because the opportunity is significantly curtailed, but also because our income and the source of our property is no longer being seized. The rationalization and justification leg of the fraud triangle also takes a significant hit with the fair tax. The mindset that the income tax is theft and our justification for not paying it in full is now eliminated. A September 2020 article penned by yours truly goes much deeper into this phenomenon and how the fair tax elegantly addresses the problem of illegal tax evasion without needing to hire 100,000 new IRS auditors to harass U.S. citizens into paying what they essentially feel is property seizure. The research paper is available at FAIRtax.org in the evasion section of the research tab. The fair tax saves the day not only by eliminating the psychological predisposition to illegally evade paying taxes, but it also addresses the only true controllable leg of the fraud triangle, opportunity. In conclusion, as Jade makes clear, the fair tax, H.R. 25, is more than just a proposal for a retail sales tax. It's a fundamental restructuring of the federal fiscal structure, and it largely eliminates the fraud that is now growing in the income payroll tax system. Now, unlike other excess taxes, which are normally applied to specific products and in different percentage amounts, the fair tax applies a 23% inclusive rate to all new retail products and retail services. The fair tax is the answer. The fair tax is a national retail sales tax on new retail goods and retail services. It provides a family credit so that all purchases up to the poverty level for each family are not taxed. There's no withholding from your paycheck, and you never have to file a tax return again telling the government how much you earned and how much you spent. Plus, you'll never be harassed by the IRS ever again either, because the fair tax abolishes the IRS. Now, many of you have labored tirelessly for freedom from the federal income tax and the IRS. You deserve a great deal of credit for your efforts to educate the American people on the need to fund the American government in a way that's good for America and returns freedom to the American people. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax and the IRS with an alternative system that could still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax and the IRS is with the fair tax. Now, make no mistake about it. The fair tax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the fair tax will be fierce and unrelenting. And don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempts to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can finally eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent effort from all of us. We need your financial assistance, and we need your grassroots assistance. Now, if you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the fair tax to President Trump, please let us know. Please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representatives and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the FAIR tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.